Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Tim Buckley, and I'm founder of Beyond the Lines. Beyond the Lines is all around helping leaders across audit, risk, and controls turn insight into decisions, ownership, and outcomes. The work we do is rooted in internal audit transformation, but these challenges rarely sit neatly inside one function. They cut across assurance, ownership, risk, culture, governance, and the way decisions actually get made. That's exactly why I wanted to start this Leadership Signals mini series. Practical conversations with experienced leaders about how to make governance, assurance, and risk leadership work better in the real world. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Kristian Bollerup, VP, Corporate Risk and Internal Audit at the Lego Group. Today, we're talking about modernizing the three lines at scale and how to reduce friction and duplication in a global business without creating bureaucracy. Most organizations don't struggle with the three lines model in theory, but they do struggle with how it works in practice. So the aim of today is to keep it practical, grounded, and useful for anyone working across audit, risk, and controls. I'd also just like to say that we do have a Q&A functionality, so please feel free to send in questions, and we'll definitely have some time at the end to go through some of those. So Kristian, thank you once again for joining me, and I'd like to hand over to you for a brief introduction about yourself before we get started.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And thanks for having me on your webinar series, not just as a guest, but as the very first ever guest.
Yeah, we're very pleased to have you and the very first guest. Really
Absolutely,
pleased to have
what
you
an
here.
honor. What an honor. Just a bit about myself as an introduction. I have a sort of a plain vanilla audit background. I used to work for Big Four for quite many years doing financial statement audit. So I can certainly talk about debits and credits as well. But actually transitioned into the internal audit space about 12, 13 years ago. And I've been doing internal audit, internal controls, risk management, combos of all of the above since then in a couple of Danish companies, Danfoss, industrial manufacturing, now at the Lego Group, which is consumer products, consumer goods, and in between also a stint in a startup company, Impero, doing internal controls. So I can sort of speak to many of the elements that you were also referring to in your introduction.
Thanks, Kristian. Really appreciate that intro. So to get things started then, we'll set the scene a bit. So in your experience, why do you think the three lines breaks down at scale and why does this matter?
Yeah, I think a couple of factors are leading to the sort of old-fashioned three lines of defense, in particular, breaking down at scale. I think one factor playing in is that it's a crazy world out there. It's a volatile
Yeah.
world, and we're sort of faced with so many changes, so many risks, so many opportunities that it's hard to stay on top of all of it if you're working in silos.
Hmm.
And I think
Definitely.
essentially what is breaking down with when we're kind of looking at things at scale is exactly that people are looking at this in isolation, in silos, in their part of the business. That is what is causing this to break down. I think what we're seeing is that people need to be on top of all of these matters, risk, foresight, risk mitigation, internal controls, audits coming at you left, right, and center. It's not just the financial statement audits any longer. It's CS triple D, deforestation, ISO certification, IT certifications, NIST 2, NIST,
Yeah, it's
all
compliance
sorts of things.
overload at the moment, isn't
It's
it?
compliance overload at the moment. So if everyone is sort of working in silos, both to be on top of things and also to document that they are on top of things, then it is going to be hard to run a company with the three lines being very sort of formally set up. I think that that's
Yeah.
what really breaks down.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, the three lines model is steeped in that sort of tradition and history. It's very
Hmm.
siloed, very separate. And today, things have moved on from there, and we're definitely looking more at an
Absolutely.
integrated assurance type
Yes,
approach.
absolutely. I
But
I mean a personal reflection from the Lego group. It's I think everyone really sort of appreciates the benefits of having an internal audit function. Right?
mhm,
So providing the assurance to our executives, to our audit committee, to our board that was sort of on top of the most prominent risks we have at this company, that's fine. But they want more. Right? They
mhm,
want sort of our input, our advice, our foresight on top of all of that. And
yeah.
and and you can't deliver that if you're sort of just focused on what formally belongs in your third line.
I agree. And that actually nicely comes on to my next question, which is where do you see friction and duplication really coming from across the lines? What are the pinpoints that you can point us to where you're seeing that friction?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I see is repeat asks for the same evidence. But
Hmm.
but but then the ask is the same. The format is usually different, usually a different one, right? So I'm asking for evidence from an audit perspective, but an external regulator may ask for the same evidence in a slightly different format.
Hmm.
Leadership may ask for a plan and some documentation and some evidence in a third format. So often it's the same ask, uh, but in a slightly different format. So people are sort of duplicating or triplicating everything they do to satisfy various assurance providers.
Yeah. So we've got repeat requests for the same
Repeat,
evidence.
yes, exactly.
And in the business's
And then
eyes,
if you sort of try to occasionally then agree, okay, well, I'm not doing it because you can sort of tap into what someone else is doing instead, or you can tap into a different format.
hmm,
Then at times things may get lost. Actually, that if you're sort of, especially if you're kind of splitting responsibility between two people, then someone told me that then it's 20% each, and the rest is sort of lost in the space in between. So I
yeah,
think that's often what we see, that repeated asks, but often it's blurred ownership. So
yeah.
sort of factors that both seem to make life harder for organizations at scale.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, do you see that, at the Lego group, is there sort of overlapping mandates or, are people really clear about where their responsibility starts and ends?
I I I mean we're not doing a bad job,
Hmm.
not at all. But I think that this is where we have some opportunities as a company still. I mentioned in your with your previous question, external regulation, CS triple D,
Yeah.
that especially kind of new compliance, then we're often kind of just a little too late
Hmm.
to be on top of what's coming. And in fact, often what is coming represents some of the most important risks for our company, right?
Yeah.
So so I think it's yeah, it's definitely an area where we can do better, be more aligned.
Hmm.
That I think is still an opportunity even in our quite successful company.
Okay, great. And that actually leads me on to we've got a question here from Kieran. It says, given your complexity, how do you effectively manage the three lines of defense process and your challenges? So, for example, asking for repeat evidence for different reasons, how do you best manage it? And I guess that really leads on to what was going to be my next question, which is what does good look like in a
Hmm.
global business like yours?
Yeah. I think a couple of things are certainly included in what good looks like to me. Um, I think one is integration of work,
Hmm.
integrated processes. So I um, I, I what we've done at the Lego Group is to create an integrated risk management and audit function, or at least a function that integrates many parts of the risk management process with the
Okay.
internal audit function. What's important in our setup is that the business still owns the risk, right?
Hmm.
So our risk management setup doesn't transfer the management of the risk to a centralized function, but we are integrated in the sense that we do assist the business in identification of risk, assessment of risk. We can even sort of support them in how to manage the risk.
Okay.
Is there a framework that we can use to support us? But we don't manage it. That's the role of the business.
Yeah. And
And
I'm really glad you mentioned that because we have another question
oh, okay.
from Sahini, which says, interesting to hear your thoughts on how to embed accountabilities on the first line and second line, especially for some of the less mature areas like
Hmm.
ESG,
Yeah,
non-financial reporting risks.
yeah, yeah.
So I guess that leads on to that. How do you ensure that that ownership is staying with the first line rather than slipping into
Yeah,
the second
but I
line?
think that is really sort of called out very specifically. Tim, would it be okay if I share just a one slide, perhaps actually
Of course, yes. No, that would be great.
to just show how we're doing it at the Lego group. Let me see if I can. Uh,
Yep, we can see that.
yeah, this was actually the slide I wanted to share. I hope you can sort of see a sort of a bridge
Yes.
that represents the role we play in risk management. So if I sort of look at risk management in a four-step as a four-step way of doing risk management, then we're involved in the work that goes into identifying and assessing the risk. So is there risk out there, and how important is it to the Lego group? That's we're involved in. But then first line of the business, they respond to the risk, right? They
Okay.
do day-to-day management of the risk. We play the role of second line. We can help them develop a criteria, a framework, develop sort of a plan,
Hmm.
but they own the plan and they own the risk. then finally, we can also help them in the phase where they report on the risk to executives and the audit committee, etc. But to us, it's very, very important that ownership of the daily management of the risk stays in the business. So that's how we're trying to ensure that we're not sort of creating an industry on top of the business, right?
Yeah,
That this involves the business. In fact, it more than ever involves the business. Now
I
we're
really,
just trying to make sure that they're not duplicating or skipping any of the work.
yeah,
That's how we try to do it.
I really like that visual. And I guess, some of the challenges I've seen, especially with some of my clients, is getting the business to really truly take that ownership. The second line can organize, facilitate, guide. What are some of the tactics that you've used where maybe there's been areas that are challenging in terms of accepting ownership? Any sort of tips or tricks that the people on the webinar could
Yeah,
use?
yeah. Yeah, and this is probably an area where we can still improve as a company, because I think if the risk is then not being managed in the way I would like to see it managed, that then what do I do? So I think that still is a you could say will forever be the issue.
Hmm.
But I'm a fan of what I would describe as the federated model.
Okay.
So the federated model creates sort of a, a centralized risk management oversight office, so to speak. And as long as the business then actually drives the risk in the right way, follow their plans, their that they meet their milestones, their gateways, then there's no need for the federation, the federated office to step in. Then
Hmm.
we'll just let the business continue with their own mitigation or their own management of the risk. But in case they're not exactly delivering, then the federated model allows the decentralized office to then take a slightly stronger role in the management of the risk, stepping in the planning around the management of the risk, helping them more to define a framework, helping them even more to move this forward, nudge them in the right direction. So actually stepping in where needed. I think that's a model that I'm personally sort of favoring. That I think that could really sort of benefit many companies if you sort of had that opportunity if things are not moving as fast as you would like them
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really good advice. If we sort of take a step back then and go back to sort of the three lines,
Yeah.
we spoke about, having the different lines, there's some overlap. What are the operating mechanics that you've seen that make it work really well in practice? That makes the three lines model still something that people can stand by?
Yeah. Um, Another sort of artifact that I would like to see is assurance mapping. So
Okay.
actually describing to leadership, including sort of oversights levels, audit committee boards, how are various functions and assurance providers working together to manage or even mitigate the most important risks of the company. So actually, on not too many slides, potentially even sort of just one slide, presenting to management who's actually on top of the various top risks of the company. That can be, in my case, the risk and audit function, but other assurance providers, other second line functions at the Lego Group also play a role in that, such as our legal department, our ISO audit function, our data protection office, various other functions we have across the company that all sort of has as a key deliverable to give assurance or provide oversight over the most relevant risks of the company. If you can sort of map that out on a page, then I think it's a massive benefit to leadership, because then you can actually see where there's overlap, and you can actually see where there's gaps in the assurance that is provided. I think that is something that has really benefited us at the Lego Group. It's not a quick fix, because to really understand what kind of assurance various functions are providing, you need to actually spend some time with them. So not a quick fix, but I think a massive enabler for us in making three lines work much more effectively and efficiently in our company, for sure.
Yeah, I fully support that. I think that's great advice. I know, with some clients over here in the UK, with Provision 29 coming into place, assurance mapping's been a big part of that, to see,
Exactly.
where are we
Where
really
are
getting
we?
that assurance?
Yes, exactly.
From across the business. And, typically it does start with finance or internal audit. That's the sort of go-to. But
Absolutely.
actually, we've got pockets of other second lines
We
across the
do.
business,
Yes,
legal,
exactly.
compliance. And if
Yes,
you can map
exactly.
all of that out, it gives you a view that a lot of organizations don't have.
Yes, exactly. And I think what has been interesting in our case is that certain enterprise risks don't really have any assurance over them, right? Because it's too operational in nature. It's hard to establish any kind of control over geopolitical threats. Like
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
there's something we can do as a company to make ourselves more resilient, and that we can give some assurance over. But just explaining to leadership and to our audit committee that, hey, that we actually do have some prominent risks that are not such controlled or mitigated by anyone, because that's sort of out of our hands. We can't mitigate that, even if we believe we're a good, great company. That's probably out of our hands. But showing those gaps to management, and after that, then at least provide some assurance over our resilience plans. I think that has been very beneficial in those conversations.
And it's reassuring for the board, because at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know.
No,
So if you're
exactly.
not if you're not being presented a map like this, the board can feel a bit in the dark when it comes to those types of risks. Great. So I've got a few more questions, but we do have quite a few questions on the Q&A. So I'm just going to quickly go to a couple of those, and then we'll save the rest till the end. So one question here from Letty is around, if risk management is second line and internal audit is third line, how are you ensuring that auditors remain objective? And that's something that I always consider as well when I see these hybrid risk internal audit roles. What are the safeguards you're putting into place?
What I can tell you is that it's something I spent a lot of time on when I'm engaging with our stakeholders, because the question is spot on. How do you make sure you stay independent when you are in the audit role, and the next day you may show up as more second line. First of all, I think there's some things we never do in either capacity. I never own or manage any risk. As mentioned before, and as I showed you on the slide, it's always the business's risk. So I think that's really important. I don't take any management decisions. It's not me deciding if we're doing A or B to manage a risk. That's always something done by management. I don't set any thresholds or define any risk appetite. That's also the business's job. So I spend a lot of time on it. I'm carefully explaining in what capacity I'm showing up today, because now and then, at times, I do show up with a team on Monday that is doing more risk management types of work, and then I'm showing up the next week with another team performing an audit.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very careful to explain to the business in what capacity am I here today, or are we here today? What can you expect from us? What is it that we're doing with this activity versus the activity we did last week, or the activity we're doing next week? So I think explain, and then also sort of call out, we call out carefully to our audit committee that, hey, here we have had to put in some guardrails, use other resources to make sure that it's not the same people being involved in monitoring things from a risk management perspective, and then having to do audits of the same topic next week. So when I talk about sort of integrate as really something you should do, I think it also sort of comes with a price that then you just need to spend more time explaining the integration to your stakeholders.
Yeah, and that actually leads to a second question. Sorry, Kristian, because I think you might be about to answer this as well. So we've got from Morgan, the move to an integrated assurance model seems to be a no-brainer to enhance efficiency and provide opportunities to help the business advance. Do you think most companies are in the progress of adopting this? And if not, why not? Do you think it's commonplace?
Well, I think more and more companies are at least sort of moving in that direction. Obviously I'm well aware of financial sector companies who may need to apply more formality around things. That being said, I think all companies should move the functions and the lines closer to one another, right? So maybe you can't formally integrate, but then at least make sure that you move across the lines in your conversations, right? Then make sure that you speak to the other lines on a daily basis to make sure that things are actually aligned, and we were not duplicating, and we're not seeing any gaps either, right? I think that really is important, and I think you can do that even if you're for one or another reason you're not allowed to, or you don't want to make the integration formal. So I think enhanced communication really is something everyone can do. Develop integrated processes. I think that's something everyone can do. I also want to call out the use of technology to provide the same evidence to many people. I think it's definitely also something that will enable a more efficient and effective process across the lines.
So some sort of integrated GRC type tooling where different teams
Exactly.
can have
Yes,
access. I mean,
exactly.
it makes everyone's life much easier, doesn't it?
Much, much easier. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm going to go on to one of my questions next, and then I'm going to save 10 minutes for Q&A, so we will get to
Sure.
everyone's question. So what's a simple game plan we can use next week to reduce friction and duplication across the line? What is something tangible I can do on Monday?
Um, it's it would be great if we could sort of just do things on Monday and then they
It may
were
be a tough
kind of
question.
fixed fixed on Tuesday, right? I think there's some as said, I think that there's some things that everyone can do. I mean, clarify, map, um, enhance communication, leverage technology.
Mhm,
I think you could say what may be relevant to people on Monday is to to be aware of friction being called out. I think
okay.
that would be and I think should be a concern if people are kind of talking about how they need to provide evidence to person A from risk management and person B from internal audit and person C from external audit and person D for management. That's when I would sort of start to sort of ask if that really is the most optimal way of of working of working with assurance.
Okay,
So
perfect.
so so watch out for too much coordination, too many meetings, too many different formats, too many complaints, honestly, from the business that couldn't you just use the same format? Or great if you had been in the meeting as well, because I actually just explained this to some other person. I think
Yeah.
that I think is should be sort of a bit of a warning signal that that organizations should be mindful of.
Definitely. And I think that's a fair challenge from people in the business. I mean, everyone's busy, no one's work life is getting easier. So
No,
explaining things multiple times, you can see the frustration there.
absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to go on to some questions because we've got quite a few here. So we've got one from Sarah. How do you distinguish between sharing genuine best practices across the lines and simply circulating policies, methodologies, especially in a sort of large decentralized business?
Yeah, I yeah, I think actually first of all, sort of circulating policies probably has never been a great way of kind of getting to any
Mm,
kind of result. So I I think it's okay if I'm asked for best practice to explain what my perspective is on what would be best practice. But I think it's still important that the business decides what they believe is best practice and how they
hmm
want to do things. So again, I think it's very important to sort of explain what is our role here. We're not making your decisions. We're not creating your process. We're not creating your policy. You need to create that. You need to design that. You need to implement that. I have some perspectives, but that's just based on my perspective, and you're the one who owns this. So I think that's important, but I'm not kind of shying away from giving an answer to people that ask me for my view on best practice.
Yeah. That makes sense. We've got another question here from Christopher. So, in your experience, what is the most useful signal that alignment across audit, risk, and controls is actually improving decision making and not just improving coordination?
I mean, we've had actually some specific projects at the Lego Group where I've worked closely with other functions to oversee initiatives performed by the business. You could say where my role was to be the voice of risk,
Hmm.
and but it actually sort of led to a much better way of doing business. We became more resilient. We became less dependent on specific uh, items in our value chain.
Yep.
So 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 of course that's the role I think I can play, that I'm sort of the voice of risk. Hey, we need to be mindful of this. We need to stay away from that. Uh, but just as risk factors, right? And then
Yeah.
the business actually, they were the ones driving this forward, moving this along, and it actually led to us doing much better business.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen that as well myself. When you've got different departments, whether it's audit, risk, working in tandem, typically the information that's getting given to management is of higher quality, it's faster,
Yeah.
management are much more able to make decisions, in a well-informed way. Resolution tends to happen quicker. Ownership is definitely stronger, and I think
Yes,
those things all start to align. And then you think actually, it's great that we've coordinated these three lines, but there's a much
exactly.
bigger impact than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great. The next question we had was from Mark. So he's in support of the federated model that you've described. But he's asking, what challenges do you foresee with this approach? And are there any compelling reasons to keep the three lines?
Well, I think there is a challenge in the sense that if we apply and implement a federated model, then at what point are we then actually managing the risk, right? So if we're now saying that, hey, now we're actually not too pleased with the progress you're making, we're kind of stepping in to co-create a plan or improve the plan, enhance the plan.
Hmm.
Then I think we're very close to actually running the risk, driving the risk, right? So I think we that that's an important step to take, and very important to sort of explain what is it that we're now exactly doing, and when are we sort of giving it back to you as a business to take it forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to sorry, one more question from the audience, and then I will have one final question for myself. So quite
Yeah.
brief. We've got 5 minutes left. So this one is from Medhavi. How can the three lines of defense be made into an integral part of strategy making? So I presume here they're meaning, across the wider business, how can we get that three lines embedded in strategy?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, at least what we do at the Lego Group is to we take, when we define our risk plan and our audit plan, we take input from a number of sources, the external environment, some key data points, interviews with stakeholders, and
Hmm.
our strategy as well. Our strategy as a company, And there's a feedback loop back to the strategy office as well, right? That, okay, now we have, now we got all the inputs. We created our audit plan, our risk activity plan. And here are some points back to you. We heard this from stakeholders. They're concerned about a market. They're concerned about a product. They're concerned about something else out there.
Hmm.
Is that something that should be considered when you work on the next strategy role? So
Yeah.
sort of creating a continuous loop where audit risk management is not working again in silos, in just in their lines, but actually are integrated with the rest of the company. I think that's the ambition.
That's great. I'm going to ask you one last question, Kristian, before we close out. So, what would be your key takeaway that you'd want to leave with the audience when it comes to modernizing the three lines model?
Yeah, I think speak to your stakeholders. That's definitely sort of one key message. Then I'm gonna say be clear on the lines, but then blur them, right?
Yeah.
Then go across, and really sort of integrate how we work. I think those are probably kind of three key takeaways. Speak to your stakeholders, blur the lines, and integrate the processes and the work. I think those would be sort of my key takeaways for the audience. Yeah. Um, I'm um, I'm happy to continue conversations with everyone. By the way, on LinkedIn, I obviously have a LinkedIn profile. I know this is not a great webinaring, Tim, but I do have a business card that people may or may not be able to see on the screen. Probably easier to reach out just on LinkedIn. I'm happy to continue the conversations.
I love that. I have a little Lego that my wife got me actually that looks like me and it's in my bag or I would have got it out. But no, I really appreciate that, Kristian. And everyone, please go and connect with Kristian on LinkedIn. I know there's more questions on here that unfortunately we didn't have the time to get to. So I'm sure he would be uh, absolutely delighted to carry on that conversation. Kristian, I'd just like to say thank you. It was a really insightful discussion and one which I know the Beyond the Lines community will have enjoyed. I can see some comments here saying that it was a great conversation, and I just want to echo that. Um, this is exactly what the Leadership Signals series is designed for, practical conversations that help leaders across audit, risk, and controls think differently about how their work lands, how ownership's created, and how decisions actually improve. And I think for me, today's conversation on the three lines was a perfect example of that because none of this works well in a silo. Internal audit, risk, controls, the business, we've all got to interact in a way that creates clarity rather than duplication. For everyone on the webinar, there will be more sessions in the Leadership Signals series. I'll be announcing the next person next week, so please keep an eye out for that. I'll also be sending out a recording and the follow-up insights and some practical resources through the Beyond the Lines newsletter. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. And thanks again to everyone for joining us. And Kristian, thank you so much for your time. And good night, everyone.